this is good. Do it in the.
Professor is in there.
Yeah.
Or I think you can put a weight on the cover and then just drop it down.
Great, got it. Or
So many engineers. Very good. This is perfect.
you just use the glass. No.
It's not hold on.
Hope.
Do you want to drag the table? Is that going to be better?
No, no. It's okay.
That's good. Okay. Very good. Have a seat. Oh yeah, you guys do that, then you all show up. Oh, that's perfect.
Okay. Yeah.
You have to sit behind.
Here, yeah.
Actually, you have to sit between us.
Here.
It's okay there.
Yeah, I think it's okay.
If you wanna come.
No, I think it's fine.
Sahanavavatu sahanau bhunaktu sahaviryam karavavahai tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Shruti Smriti Purananam Shruti Smriti Purananam Alayam Karunalayam Alayam Karunalayam Namami Bhagavat Pada Namami Bhagavat Pada Shankaram Loka Shankaram Shankaram Loka Shankaram. Sarva Vedanta Siddhanta Sarva Vedanta Siddhanta Gocharam Tamagocharam Gocharam Tamagocharam Govindam Paramanandam Govindam Paramanandam Sadgurum Pranatosmyaham Sadgurum Pranatosmyaham. It's a very fortunate day for you all to be here. It's an amazing, you guys are amazing students. This is uncomfortable because you're on my left. I can't see you properly.
Yeah.
Don't forget about it. Just sit the way you were sitting. That was perfect.
Exactly.
Very comfortable. It was nicely spread out. Everyone had their own space.
Yes.
I like that much better.
Yes.
Sit comfortably. That's why we have so much space, so that we can sit comfortably. The video doesn't matter. We can deal with it. There's nobody.
Should we just turn so that
Yeah, you can just turn it to me. That's fine. There is no movie to be made here. There's nothing, no special effects to be added. Although I recently bought a motion capture system for my laboratory, so can make movies. Thank you. That's good enough. Don't worry about it. It's much nicer to have you all sit comfortably, and because the topic that we're talking about requires vichara, right? That was the big thing that we talked about last time. We've been talking about this. It's about vichara, and vichara requires a little bit of space. Not just physical space, it requires a little bit of mental space, some comfort, be able to push away your day-to-day worries and topics a little bit out of the way so that you can do vichara. The great thing is that you are all students of higher education, which means you do vichara all day, and you know that as well as I do, that in order to really think something, you need to give yourself some space, right? How many of you work till late in the night? All of you, right? And why do we work till late in the night? It's just quiet. It's just the quietness, that space that ability to do vichara. Now, my dad used to call me a nishachar. He said, "Vichar nahi, tum nishachar ho." Because I used to, nishachar is the one who walks around at night.
Same.
Right? So I used to sit there and I was like, "What is a nishachar? I don't know what a nishachar is." Then later on I figured out that I was going to say that no, I'm not a nishachar. I'm a person who does vichara at night. Is there a word for that? He says, you make one up. But we find a certain amount of space at night. Sometimes, and I make this joke sometimes to my family members. They'll say, "Why are you up till I still sleep at 2?" So they'll ask me, "Why are you up?" And so I tell them, I'm really afraid that the good ideas will come and I'll be sleeping and they won't find me. So I end up trying to stay awake most of the time. They're like, so you shouldn't sleep at all then, right? I said, no, but I get tired and I fall asleep and then I'm like, okay, I can't stay up anymore. But that was my experience, was sometimes these ideas that are floating around seem to find you at inopportune times. And you just have to be available to them. So vichar requires a little bit of space, and space requires, what is the most important thing that you need for space? It's really funny, you need freedom, right? You need freedom. You don't need people telling you, yelling at you, and it's mostly freedom from yourself. It's not freedom from the rest of the world, you need a little bit of space in terms of freedom from yourself to be able to think, to do some vichara. Sometimes you can write and do vichara, sometimes you can just sit and daydream, and that can be vichara. That's the other thing, right? So people will ask me sometimes, especially people from India will ask me, so you're a professor, so what do you do? So I usually tell them that I have one course, I teach 3 hours a week, and that's about it. And then I watch their reaction. They go through a whole set of emotions. They're like, really? I said, yeah, I just, I have 3 hours in a week, I just do that. And then they go, okay. Then what do you do for the rest of the day? I said, just, vichara. I just think, he said, you think so much to teach that 1 hour? I said, no, I think about other things too. It's really a lot of fun. So initially I used to tell people, no, I do this research, I do that research. And I said, no, I think I'm just going to stop that. I'm just going to tell them exactly what they want to hear, that I do nothing. And that has worked really well, because people look at me and they go, either he's not telling me the truth, or he's pulling my leg, or he really does nothing. And I really want that life where I get to do nothing. It's an interesting position. I arrived at it over a few years. I used to try and explain, especially when you go to India and you meet your in-laws. They'll ask you, what do you do? How do I explain to them? They've never come to the US. They've never done higher, they haven't participated in the studies or the research here. So I just go, okay. Oh, even better, I'll tell you the example is when I got married. So I had to explain to my wife what I do. And I remember meeting her for the first time, and she had participated in some research programs, or she knew some researchers from IIT Bombay, so she had a little bit of sense, but she just kept looking at me like, don't know what he does, I think he just goofs off. Yes, it's a relaxed life, but
so what she thinks now?
What does she think? No, she says, fucking crazy hours.
should ask her.
She should say, tenure ho gaya na. That's the big thing. Tenure ho gaya na, to ab kyun kar rahe ho? Trash nikal ke ao. It's not holding you back from getting tenure. I'm going. So it's vichara requires a little bit of space, and it's a funny thing. For you guys, it's a very positive thing because you're involved in higher education. But sometimes it can be very difficult to find the opportunity to do that. So last time, go ahead. We can ask. Oh, yeah, I can switch it on. It's on.
Oh, it's on.
It's on. It's recording. I switched it on because I felt I was going to forget, so I switched it on a little while back. What I was going to ask is, so you remember the context where we are at, right? Where are we at? Do you remember the context of the verses?
Yeah.
Correct. I know that we are, so if we ask very particularly, we are on Uparati and Titiksha, which got tested yesterday. Titiksha got tested yesterday. But the context of it is a little bit, you want to go take a step back and think about what was the context. What was the context? Sadhana chatushtaya. Adhikaritvam was the context. Before that, the context was self-knowledge. So the purpose of the study of the Vivekachudamani, the purpose of study of anything, there has to be a subject matter, right? What is the subject matter of Vivekachudamani or Tattva Bodh, or for that it matter for Gita or for any of the Vedantic texts? The subject matter is not really an object. The subject matter of the study of Vedanta is the subject themselves, which is very unique because that's not very common. And you could say that that's not true. Anatomy is a study of the subject. Is it truly? Is it? I mean, your anatomy includes your hair and it includes your nails. And I can cut off your nails and they'll be separate from you and you will say, this is not me, not anymore. At the same time, when I used to make fun with my kids. I used to say, do you want to be one with the banana? Do you want to be one with the banana? Eat it. You're one with the banana. Now the banana is you and you are the banana. They're like, no. So at some intuitive level, we understand that we're not necessarily the components of the physical body or the components of the mind. And we've talked about it from the perspective of Tattva Bodh and so on before. The subject matter here is the self. But the self is more subtle than the sthula sharira, the sukshma sharira, the karana sharira, which we've talked about before. That self is the Satchidananda Atma, which is the subject matter. But we haven't quite gotten there. We are getting there one step at a time within the context of Vivekachudamani. And what the teacher tells is that in order to get this education, you have to have some adhikaritvam. That was the context. Adhikaritvam comes about from having sadhana chatushtaya. And the sadhana chatushtaya, there were 4 of them. Number 1 was nitya vastu vivekaha. The second one was iham utrartha phal bhoga viragaha. And the third one was sham adi shatak sampatti. And the 4th one is mumukshutvam. So the 4 sadhana chatushtaya is the same that appeared in Tattva Bodha. Anytime you study Vedanta, they will keep coming back to the same sadhana chatushtaya. So that is the context. Nitya vastu vivekaha, we talked about it earlier. We understand nityatvam is a very subtle topic to discuss on because our conception of time is based on our conception of change. And the only thing we have ever come across in this universe as an object is something that changes. So the thing that is not changing has not yet appeared as an object, and neither will it ever appear as an object within this universe. Iham utrartha phal bhoga viragaha, we talked about the various lokas. And then we got to the point where we were talking about Sham, Adi, Shatak, Sampati. They're the cornerstone of sadhana. Shama, we talked about a little bit earlier, and then Tama. Shama is the ability to understand the true value of something. So there is a true value of things. We sort of know it at an intuitive level, but we sort of lose perspective. So in many ways, Sham is having perspective. Things have their place in the world. They have their intrinsic value, and then there is the subjectivity that is imposed by us. Nobody is going to ever tell you that, hey, take a piece of gold, right, a gold coin. It has intrinsic value because it's a rare metal, and you can trade based on it. But there's a subjective value to it too, where we see every day that the price of gold is fluctuating. There is an intrinsic value to gold, and then there is a subjective value which is fluctuating, and then there can be a subjective value where I say that this gold ring was my dad's, and he has passed away, and now I've inherited it. What is the value of this gold ring to me? It's different than the price of the gold, it's different than the fluctuation in the price of the gold, and perhaps I would never trade it until I'm really, really desperate. So there is a subjectivity to the value of things, and what Shama does is it gives you perspective. So tomorrow I get into a situation where I'm really in a bad situation, I would say, yes, even my dad would have said, if this is what you need to move forward, do it. Yeah, it's a process. So there is a perspective that Shama brings. Dhamma, on the other hand, tells you that if you have not yet arrived at that perspective, then you can find a way to restrain your mind, restrain your senses to follow Dhamma. So what Dhamma says is, okay, yet the perspective of things is not fully clear, but you know that ahimsa is to be practiced, you know that amanitvam is to be practiced, you know adambitvam is to be practiced. Amanitvam is not having false pride. So there is real pride in that there is false pride. Amanitvam and adambitvam are two So a little bit later in the Gita, in chapter 13, Arjuna asks Krishna what is Jnanam and what is Gayam, what is knowledge and what is to be known. So what is Gayam, Ishwar of course talks about Atma, but what is Jnanam, he gives a very interesting answer. He says Jnanam is Amanitvam, Adambhitvam, Ahimsa, Kshanti, Arjavam. He says knowledge is values. Right? He says if you are going to get to Gayam, the path to get to Gayam is to have the proper values that are needed. And Amanitvam is not false pride. It's an incorrectly placed pride. What does that mean? It means that you have reached here. From the perspective of many students in India, you are in a very accomplished place. You are in a very envious place, one would say. And it has come about from your hard work, right? You took the exams, you studied, you got all your A's, and you graduated, and you were able to come and get admitted to Purdue, which is a tough place to get admission in. And then you became students here. And so you can be proud of it, right? There's no issue with having a little bit of mana with all the effort that you have put in it. When Ishvara says Amanitvam, he says, no, I don't have an issue with your contribution. I just want you to recognize the role your parents played. I want you to recognize the role your teachers played. I want you to recognize the resources that were consumed in you coming here. And I want you to recognize all those people who got left behind. Because there cannot be 1 out of 1. You're 1 out of 100. So there were 99 people who were behind you. So Amanitvam puts a proper perspective in it. Adambhitvam is literally false pride, where you say, I am the only one who came. Right? So I must be really special. Not only Amanitvam is something else, Adambhitvam is false pride, that you really did not deserve it, but you are claiming it. So Dhamma consists of making sure that you follow the values that are in accordance with Dharma, and Shama is having proper perspective, which brings us to the topic of Uparati and Titiksha. So this is verse number 24 and 25 in the Vivekachudamani. In the PDF that you're looking at, it's called verse 14, and it goes Bahya analambanam vrittehe Bahya analambanam vrittehe Esho uparati uttama Esho uparati uttama Sahanam sarva dukkhanam apratikara purvakam chinta vilaparahitam sa titiksha nigadhyate. Continues, and okay, we'll worry about that later. So this was verse 24 and 25, and they talked about Uparati and Titiksha. So it says Bahya analambanam vrittehe Esho uparati uttama. So he says Bahya analambanam vrittehe. Let me see what Shankaracharya says about vrittehe here in the context. Okay, he's using vritti a little bit differently. Vritti is typically used for, what have we talked about earlier? We've said vritti is a form. Vritti literally means from. Vritti is a form in the antahkaranam. So right now, this is a vritti in your mind. Right? The vritti consists of the space, the colors, the time, the sound, the smells. That entire experience is a vritti. That's the Sanskrit word. It's quite a fascinating word that is used for vritti. In this case, vrittehe is being used to represent the ahankara. So, bahya analambanam vrittehe esho uparati uttama. He says, uparati, the best, is best explained as what? Bahya analambanam, that means not dependence on outside of your sense of self. So it does not depend upon anything external to itself. Uparati is, what does it say? Uparati is depending upon yourself for your own sense of self. Is that interesting, or is that difficult to understand? Do we depend upon external objects for defining ourselves? Remember, this is not yet at the point where you've reached Atma Jnanam. So we've not yet arrived at Satchidananda.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah, we do, right? it's kind of central, right from your beginning. And I'm as guilty of it as anybody else. I'll tell my kids that if you are not going to do well in school, then you're not going to do good.
Actually, even our name,
Yeah.
it's
It's even you can.
outside thing.
It's an outside thing. And what Ishvara is saying here, or what Shankaracharya is saying, is Bahya analambanam vrittehe iti Uparati is not depending upon external accomplishments for having a properly formed sense of self. There are two here, right? There are two forms sense of self, right? There's the first one is of course Satchidananda Atma, but we haven't gotten there yet. We are still in the part of sadhana chatushtaya, which means that Ishvara is saying you should have an ahankara that is well formed in so many words, which means that you have a sense of self that is not relying on external objects. That's not easy because everything I look around me seems to have an external dependence. But what could he possibly mean? What Shankaracharya is saying is that you should have a certain level of freedom, a certain level of vichara that allows you to say, yes, I can say that my ahankara depends upon, or my sense of self depends upon this quantity and it is external to me. Just the recognition of its bahya is good enough. Because as soon as you recognize that it is external, the analambanam will go away. You would no longer depend upon it. I'll give you an example from my daughter's life. So my daughter is very good softball player and she's very interested in playing softball. She's been looking forward the whole year to this summer to play softball. And she's the catcher of the team, which is equivalent to the wicket keeper, which is in softball, it's a very important position. Besides the pitcher, the catcher is extremely important. She plays that position. And she was extremely happy. She played 3 games and then there was a pitch that went in a different direction. And in spite of her wearing her glove, her mitt, it hit her pinky in such a way that it fractured it. And so she has been undergoing surgery and this and that. And so a month before, she was so disappointed when she was sitting in the doctor's office. She was saying, but I'm the catcher of the team. And how is the team ever going to proceed? And what lesson did she get out of it? The lesson that she got out of it is that it is not necessary for her to be the catcher of the team to be Stuti, to be the person that she is. Right? The person that she is a little bit different than the roles that she gets to play. And sometimes these roles go away. And that's quite all right, because it's not the end of the world. And as you get older, what will happen is you'll play a lot of roles. Right now you're in the role of a student. When you meet your friends, you're in the role of a friend. When you travel home, you're in the role of a son. And then as you grow older, there'll be so many roles you'll have to play to so many people. But what it recognizes is that these are all roles, they're functionalities, but they don't define the person themselves. Yeah, go ahead.
So my work won't define me.
Your work won't define you, but it's an important role that you do. So at the same time, so one could say that it doesn't define me, so I don't really care about it. But it's an important role that you have to play, because without you playing that role, that movie cannot be made. It will stop being made. It won't move forward. Now, if you're a sannyasi, that's a different story, because sannyasi literally consists of giving up of the different roles.
Yeah.
So what are the two meaning?
Spectators.
Yeah, so the sannyasi says that I have given up all the roles and I am going to be non-competitive in society. So that's the main thing of a sannyasi. The sannyasi says that I have given up all the other roles. I am going to be non-competitive in society and I'm going to spend the rest of my life doing vichara. And literally means atma vichara. Now you can meet different types of sannyasis in the world, and there are sannyasis who start off with this and then they lose track of it a little while later. And sometimes Swamiji in his explanation of this verse tells us a story. Now I have had the opportunity to meet a few sannyasis and swamis. There are not too many in India, but I have met a few of them. Not too many in the US, but I have met a few of them. But he lived in Rishikesh, so he met them. If you ever travel to Rishikesh or anywhere like that, 5 out of 10 people will be swamis or people who had been swamis earlier and so on. So he tells in this the story of he was living in Rishikesh at that time, and that person tells him, "Have you taken sannyasa yet?" And he was at that time on the verge; he had not yet taken sannyasa. He says, "No." The sannyasi says, "Don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it because I had taken sannyasa, I had my retirement funds, and now I'm almost finished with them, and I don't know what to do." So Swamiji is saying, "Okay, this is so different than what I thought it was going to be." It's like, this is not going to go the way.
But a sannyasi means that you don't take your retirement fund.
Exactly. So this was wrong at so many levels. He's like, "मैं शुरू कहाँ से करूँ?" This is, I have an issue with this conversation. He says there are lots of people like that you will encounter. He has great stories to tell about all kinds of Swamis he's met in Rishikesh. He tells a story once. He was a Swami and he had a person write him a letter or came to his satsang or something, and he said that I have to go to some country abroad and I have to give 10 lectures on the Gita. So can you give me some knowledge? Swamiji says, "Wait a minute, you've already signed up to teach, and then you're coming and saying, 'Can you give me something?'" He says, so I spoke to him, I said, "It's best for him to start with Tattva Bodha." So he says, asked him to attend Tattva Bodha classes. He says he came to 3. And he says, "I got enough material for 10 classes." He says, "This is too much. I've got way too much material for 10 classes. See you later." So he says, "Okay."
He's a professional speaker.
"I have enough information. I don't need any more." So it's fascinating how people, he has some really interesting stories. It's sort of eye-opening. Because all of this has got to do with recognition of the roles that we play and not becoming lost in those roles that we play.
Yeah.
In the end, even the sannyasi is a role.
We shouldn't get entangled.
We should, and that's the funny thing, right? Have you ever seen a movie and you've said, "That was an amazing performance"? For that instant, that actor had become completely identified with the role and did an awesome job doing it. So it's not fun unless you are fully involved. But at the same time, when the scene is over, you realize that it was a role, so I need to go back. So the topic of entanglement is complicated. Sometimes people will say that means that I will not do it. But the thing is, you cannot say that. What will happen is, so my teacher gives us a fabulous story. He says, let's say that we've done this awesome meditation. You woke up at 6 a.m. in the morning and you sat down and you did a very nice witness consciousness meditation, and you're really sitting in this zone of bliss, and you're like, "Wow, this is amazing." And then a voice will come, Dad, are you sleeping? Will you please wake up? You need to take me to the school." Say, you'll all come crashing down and be like, "Okay." But that voice, that's the role that you have to play. And the more you play that role with an amount of with the amount of vigor that role needs to be played with, you'll be better off. The only thing is, the recognition is internal, that I am bahya lamban vrittehe. These are important roles for us to play, and there are roles that you've stopped playing now. You no longer play the role of a cute little child. We leave that to Samvit. He can pull it off. Have you ever come across somebody who's trying to play a role that just doesn't work for them anymore? Can't you stop doing that? Please, it doesn't work. No. So when it's an interesting age between 10 and 15. So my daughter had a friend, and she used to talk like a totally, it's like a lisp. So she would fake a lisp and talk like a baby, and it's just weird. It's like you're playing a role that you're way too old for, and you don't even need to be playing it. Would you let it go? So what you'll find also, if you look at your past, is that there are roles that you have let go of, and you're no longer attached to them. You're no longer entangled to them. At some point in time, you were very attached to them, and at some point in time, you were able to leave that behind. You were the team captain of your school cricket team. That was an awesome role to play. But it's over now. Now, if you go back to your school and try to give them some fun days on how to be the captain, they'll ask you to leave. They'll be like, "Thank you very much, but we don't need your help right now." What are they trying to tell you? They're trying to tell you that you played the role, you were awesome when you played the role, but please move on. So what in so many ways, the world is telling you that these are roles that we play, but do not let them constrain or define you. Continue to have that freedom so that you're not dependent upon external.
So you're saying continue to have that freedom. What if that friend wants to be in that role? Should she have the freedom to be in that role?
Yes, you can only tell them you have the freedom to walk away. That's if they're irritating you, you have the freedom to.
You are getting irritated. But
They're absolutely free to do what they want. Yeah, that's the thing, right? You
But
never.
it will have consequences.
It will have
consequences are for everything.
Yes.
Even if you're not being, that also have consequences. Right? You define what is positive for you and what is negative for you. Maybe she wants to be away from everyone.
Yeah.
And so that's the
But
positive.
he'll have to
consequence.
acknowledge the consequences.
Yeah. So in this, what happens is, it's a very good question. The question is about how do I. It's a question actually about freedom. It's a question of the more you try to define another person's freedom, the more you'll end up constraining yourself. It's really funny, it works actually both ways. So when you try to tell, okay, I'll give you an example that will make sense. Let's say that your kid is 3 years old, right? And you tell the kid, okay, this portion of the carpet, you should not go out of here so that I can keep an eye on you. So you've constrained that individual's freedom. You know what that individual is going to do? They're going to go stand right at the edge, the first thing, and they're going to look at you. Is he going to come? Is he going to come and stop me? Can I take one more step? And they'll play with you. They'll be like, can I go here? Can I go here? And then you go. And what's happened now is that you have constrained their freedom, and now you're sitting just looking at them. You have constrained your freedom by saying, what is they doing? Are they doing the right thing? Should I? No, that. So you basically bound yourself by constraining another person. You have actually become constrained along with them. Now, I don't want this analogy to be mistaken, because kids, you have to define boundaries for them, and they'll push the boundary. You can be absolutely sure. You draw this line and tell them, don't step over it. The first thing they're going to do is come and step over it. What's going to happen? I want to know. It's an amazing curiosity in the mind of the child. What's going to happen now? I want to see.
They're explorers.
They're explorers. They're like, what is the consequence here? I don't know. I'll play with it. And that's a good thing. But when you are in relationships, relationships that are not the kind that you have a responsibility, relationships that you make of your own, it's easy to let them be free. And the more free they are to do what they want, the more free you are to do what you want. So if that person wants to do things that you don't approve of, you're free to walk away. Now, if you think that they're going to hurt themselves, it's an obligation to tell them what you do. If you think that they're going to hurt others, it's your obligation to tell them that you're going to hurt people. And if it looks like they don't understand, it's your obligation to walk away, because you want to continue with your own vichara. You don't want to become the gatekeeper of that person's freedom. So, from that perspective. But uparati is being able to recognize the roles that we play and not letting those roles necessarily constrain or define our ahankara or understanding.
One thing I just missed in the beginning, like just one liner for Shama.
Shama. Shama is the perspective.
So
Perspective.
knowing the perspective of things is Shama.
Yeah, knowing how to the perspective that is associated with the value of things is.
And then Dhamma says that if you have not
Yet
yet understood, so okay, these are some set of things,
values that you
values you should do.
withdraw yourself from that, because you will find that your ragas and dveshas are pulling you to do something that is against your value structure. In that case, you have two options. One, you pull yourself away from it forcibly. Two, you gain perspective on it so that it has no longer the hold on you.
So the Dhamma helps you to
Dhamma and Shama go together.
Go
So
together.
as long as what Swamiji says, if you don't have Shama, fake it with Dhamma.
okay.
And as long as you continue to fake it with Dhamma, Shama will come. You will gain that perspective a little bit over time.
And then so now the third thing
Is uparati.
Uparati. So Uparati is knowing the roles we are playing. So how is it different than Shama?
How is it different than Shama? So Shama is about the value of different things, not necessarily of the rules. So for example,
Of
Shama.
different things. Okay.
Yes.
And this is a individual's role.
Yes, the individuals.
So first of all, how would I know that playing a role or having a sannyas is, what is like the best thing for me? And even if we'll be playing a role, then how to know that, like, what sort of role should we play? what should be the mission of someone?
It is not
something like that?
uncommon for me to come across and for myself to have gone through the process of this decision for you. The very fact that you are here talking about Vivekachudamani at a young age, relatively as compared to the current world. I know that in all of your minds somewhere the question comes, why shouldn't I take sannyas?
Yeah.
Right? It's a question that bothers a lot of young people. It bothered me, and you sort of go around thinking, should I do it or should I not do it? I'll give you the answer that my teacher gave me, and it turns out to be true. You have to give yourself a little bit of time. It almost so happens that your circumstances will conspire to take you to the door of sannyas if it's going to happen for you. So the situation will become in such a way that that will be the only path left. If that's not happening, then it's not happening. There are two things here. There is Vividisha sannyasa and there is Vidvat sannyasa. And I talk about this in my Gita Dhyan classes because sannyasa is of two types. Vividisha sannyasa is a sannyasa as a lifestyle, which means that you say that from now on, I am not going to compete in society. I am no longer going to be involved in activities. I'm letting go of all the other roles and I'm going to focus myself on the gain of knowledge. All I'm going to do is vichara. That's as a lifestyle you've chosen. You've said, I have taken sannyasa as a lifestyle. That means that I'm going to do this. This is very difficult because what it means is there are experiences that you have not yet assimilated. And those experiences can come and may come to you in the future, and you'll have a hard time assimilating them. A lot of life is about assimilation of your experiences so that you can figure out what is the true value of what it is that you're talking about. Vividisha sannyasa is sannyasa as a lifestyle. Vidvat sannyasa, and Arjuna keeps asking Krishna this question because Arjuna, if you remember, was saying, I want to take sannyas.
Yeah.
So he keeps telling Arjuna, keeps telling Krishna, Krishna, can I take sannyas? And Krishna always tells him there are two types of sannyas, and he asks him again and again, and he keeps giving him the same answer, which is somewhat funny. But he says there are two types of sannyas, Vividisha sannyasa and Vidvat sannyasa. And he says to Arjuna, Vividisha sannyasa is not for you. The lifestyle of sannyasa will not work for you.
Why?
And so Arjuna asks him, why will it not work for me? And Krishna says that what will happen is that I have blessed you with the ability to do something. And that task will keep coming to you. It will keep coming to you because you are the only one who can wield the Gandiv. You are the only one who can actually participate in this Dharma Yuddha and fix it. So I will not let you go. I have blessed you with the ability, and I will make sure that you use that ability where it is needed. Ishvara is telling Arjuna in so many words that I have already cut out a role for you. And you cannot go against that role. If I had cut out the role of sannyasa for you, I would have told you. Or circumstances would have gotten to the point where you would have said, okay.
This again brings back to the same question. Then basically we can't do anything.
We can't do anything. No, you're doing what you're supposed to be doing.
So we are supposed to be doing something and we have to do that.
There's a little bit of...
So what is we there?
Yeah, so the question is about free will. And you're asking, which part of my will is free to do what I choose to do? There's a complicated answer to that. Now, I am not a fatalist. I am not saying that everything is cut out
No,
for
like
everyone.
Arjun, you're saying Arjun was blessed with certain things, which is like being a great warrior, a great...
So what Krishna was telling Arjuna is, yes, you can take Vividisha sannyas. Saying it won't work for you. He's not stopping him from taking it.
Yeah.
He's saying that you can try it, but it won't work for you. And he says, instead, what I want you to understand is Vidvat sannyasa, which is sannyasa through knowledge. And he says, anyways, that is a better type of sannyasa. So he talks about the two, sannyasa as a lifestyle and sannyasa through knowledge. And what Ishvara says is that, Arjuna, I'm standing right here, giving you the sannyasa that you're asking for. It is sannyasa through knowledge.
It's applying karma yoga basically.
No, it is karma yoga is preparation towards Vidvat sannyasa. So Vidvat sannyasa is understanding Satchitananda, Atma, the nature of Brahman, understanding that Jeev, Jagat and Ishvara are fundamentally connected. From one perspective, they are the same, and from one perspective, they seem to be waves of different magnitudes and the ocean being compared with water.
So basically, just like, Arjun was basically asking him, saying him that I want to take sannyasa because of the disgust of to the circumstances he was in. So, okay. So if we have a disgust towards the present lifestyle, then we shouldn't take sannyasa?
I would say that
That won't be a good reason.
you are always free to take Vividisha sannyas, but you may find yourself in that conversation with that Swami where you will be the one saying, don't take sannyas. Because when your money runs out, you'll be in trouble. What happened there was that the person had taken sannyasa without truly understanding what it is. The perspective of sannyasa is so, it's a very difficult life. It's a very, very difficult
So my
life.
question was something like this: that Arjun was determined to be a warrior, so he has to fight wars, right? So then, sure, apart from that, then he can do things. You're saying Vividisha Sannyas will not work for him. So then it has been determined that this will not work for him. So then, are you saying this that certain things are just not for Arjun, or certain things are not for person
Not
X?
under our control. They're predetermined.
Yeah,
Predestined.
are you
So,
saying
Yes, so let me ask you, it's a very good question, and it really touches upon the concept of free will versus fate. What is open to me? How much freedom do I really have? That's the question, right? He's asking,
Yeah, exactly.
how much freedom do I really have?
Yeah, like can I be a painter or I have to keep coding?
Correct. And see, that's an interesting example that you picked, because I gotta ask you, do you think you'll be a better painter than a coder?
Yeah, I tried painting and it didn't work out. So I think
Sometimes the answer is easy for you, but the question that he's asking is, how much freedom do I really have? And of course, many people have indicated or have talked about the fact that Hindus can be somewhat fatalistic. This was written to them and that's why. But Vedanta is definitely not fatalistic. Vedanta is always saying that your individual contribution matters, and it's perhaps the most important thing that you need to do. Ishvara is saying that you have to pull the trigger. Unless you pull the trigger, nothing is going to happen. And you pulling the trigger is the sadhana chatushtaya. The very fact that you're talking about it means that you've already pulled the trigger. You're trying to understand what sadhana is. You're trying to understand what adhikaritvam is. But if you're still not satisfied and you want to ask, how much freedom do I really have? Then I'll ask you to look at yourself and ask yourself the question, are you free? Aren't you already defined to a certain extent by the fact that you are a Purusha?
it is.
Aren't you already defined by your parentage to a certain extent? Aren't you already constrained by the abilities of your body, the abilities of your mind, and so on?
So
And within that range of influence, you have ton of freedom. Within that range of influence, you have a very long rope.
yeah, so basically, how I used to think about this thing is that so in answer, what can I do? Can I do anything? Yes, you can. Maybe for certain things you have to put more effort. For certain things you have to put less effort
Because
because
certain things you just cannot do.
or basically that's tending to infinity effort.
Well, can you give birth
Yeah, now there is technology
for not
for
for
medical science.
not for men?
Well, there has been a successful experiment.
I understand, but you'd have to implant a womb.
Yeah. So not really. They have done some
Some
really
other
complex things.
some other stuff. But you must understand the constraints that I'm talking.
Yeah.
Within the range of influence, you have tremendous amount of free will.
So
But
there
it is
certain
still
things that just
constrained.
within our capability are saying that, as you said, that you have been blessed with these abilities or something. So going in that direction might be helpful, doing quicker things or in a better way or with less effort. For the other direction, you might need more effort.
But Arjuna was thinking that it was less effort or it was better for him to take sannyasa.
He was
He
not.
sh-
Yeah,
You
sure.
should actually told him, no, you're going to have to do harder. But what is important to note here is that even within the context of that entire war, Ishvara was telling Arjuna, there is vidvat sannyas for you right here, right now.
So Arjun got this information from Krishna. How can a normal person get this information? That which is good, because if you have multiple options, you might realize that okay, now I'm not talking about only sannyas or spirituality, or I'm talking about now practical life. Now, if you have two options, say for anything, how do a person realize or figure out that okay, which path is going
It's
to
a
be?
very good question.
So
In
one
fact,
way is
it's,
to talk to experienced people and take their opinion and then try to see what has happened with them when they chose these paths and then how were they. And so you can always realize this. So always like this is what is you talk to experts or experienced people, those you believe that I'm not going to give you false information because they have no problem with you. So you take their advice, and then you have different advisors for different roles.
Sure.
So-
But I gotta ask the question: what is the goal?
Yeah, what is the goal? So
What is the goal?
yeah, so then no, so I'm asking like
Can somebody-
how do personalities
Well, can somebody
decide?
tell you what should be the goal for you?
No, goal person is going to decide. Now,
Ah.
which path to choose to
Ah.
achieve that goal?
The paths are not as important as the goal. They're important. They're secondary to the
Sure.
goal.
Yes.
And the goal, if it is Atma Vichara, so there are many goals in life. There is Artha, there is Kama, there is Dharma, there is Moksha. Purusharthas are 4, and there is equal emphasis on all of them in practical life. So if you are a Artharthi, or you're a Kamarthi, or a Dharmarthi, Moksharthi, you have your goals, your Purusharthas in life. And for each of those Purusharthas, what is it that you wish to accomplish? Ishvara has blessed you with the mind, Ishvara has blessed you with the brain, and Ishvara has blessed you with companionship of so many people. Talk to people, do what you want in order to accomplish your goals. If you go against Dharma, Ishvara says, going up against Dharma is like rubbing up against a tree. The only person who's going to get scratched is you. Because Ishvara says that the laws of Dharma are immutable. If you are going to decide that you're going to do actions that are going to go against it, he says, give it a shot. I've programmed it in such a way that it will eventually come and hurt you. Right? So you have an open field. But here, when we are in the context of Vivekachudamani, we've become moksharthis. We've become mumukshus. The goal is Atma Vichara. For Atma Vichara too, you can say that there are many paths that you can look at, and you can look at them and figure out what is it that you wish to do. But you've already done some of that, and you're looking at this as one of the avenues for you to be able to understand if it works good, if it doesn't work, or you find mistakes or errors in the thought process, they will only belong to me. They will not belong to the Shastra. So since I'm sitting in front of the Shastra right now as the filter, the mistakes will be mine. And I would say that maybe find a better teacher who can give it to you in a way that you fully understand.
Professor, but it kind of feels like we are
Can you
prisoners
repeat
of
last two
some
lines?
kind.
Okay, just 1 second. Yeah.
It kind of feels like we are prisoners of some kind.
Prisoners.
Yeah, and God is like playing with us.
That's an interesting analogy.
We are like lab rats and we are just put in a puzzle thing.
So no, I would say that the sense of limitation that you are referring to. So what defines a prisoner is the sense of limitation. There are certain things that they just cannot do, even
Yeah.
though they wish to.
They cannot go out.
They cannot go outside. They have been, in fact, what they have actually been done is that they have been segregated from society. They have been told it's not the space so much that we have constrained them in. We're just saying that I'm sorry, you're not ready to return to normal society yet because you have tendencies that are going to be hurtful to general population. So they have been segregated. That's not what Ishvara has done to us. He's not segregated us from populations, right? What you're saying is that I feel constrained from being able to do anything. I want to be able to fly away everywhere. I want to be able to do everything. I really want to be Ishvara. That's really what I want to be Ishvara. That's really where I want
Why
to
aren't
go.
you free to be
Yeah,
Ishvara?
can I be Ishvara? And the thing is, Ishvara is saying that please try to understand yourself, and what you may realize is that there is, like I said earlier, Vedanta talks about Sachidananda Atma. If you understand it fully, that sense of limitation is what it tries to address. Will the jiva become Ishvara? That is impossible. That is a question that is
But nobody
impossible.
asked me to be a normal human.
Fair enough, but were you asked, why do you think you need to be asked? So that's the question, right? So you're saying that I am an individual entity who has a certain amount of control. And what Vivekachudamani is about to tell you is that, wait a minute, that individual entity that you're talking about, that is mithya. The one that you have assumed to be Satyam, see, that's the issue is always between Satyam and mithya. You have staked it and said, this is Satyam. And the teaching is to explain to you, wait a minute, have you understood what Satyam and what mithya truly are? You have taken something that is mithya and called it Satyam. You have identified the snake in the rope, but there never was one. So, vichara is the correct way for you to analyze the conclusion that you have presupposed. So, coming into the study of the self, everyone approaches it with preconceived notions. And what Vedanta does is it helps you analyze, first of all, it helps you expose your preconceived notions, because we don't even know that we've made these assumptions. So it's a systematic way to get you to understand, That's the preconceived notion that I've made.
Yeah. The thing is that I'm already in this situation. I am a human, so yeah, obviously Vedanta will help me understand, what my constraints are.
Correct.
That's what I'm asking. Why are there these kinds of constraints in the first place? I wasn't asked to be, put
Yeah,
in these constraints.
I understand what you're saying. If you ever had
Why can't I see things from the God's perspective? I want to experience being a God.
you want to
Something like
experience, I understand what you're saying. Just because, I'll answer it this way. Just because I can phrase a question does not mean that the question is legitimate.
Yeah.
I
Today
can
you are in
put
God
words to
mode.
huh?
Today you are in God mode
You know?
with your dialogues.
No, just because I can put these 4 words together and the question mark does not make it a legitimate question. Fair enough.
But you get the feeling, right?
Yeah, I do.
Because
I do. It's very
usually everyone gets this feeling.
absolutely. That's
So
so.
one of my friend has very good solution to this. I'll share that. So we used to play in our school when in earlier classes that there used to be a board at the back of the classroom which is meant to be decorated. And when there is no teacher, so I used to be monitor for class and then of course I used to allow these things. So we used to do this that we have a chalk and so we'll aim somewhere and then everyone has to play. So like 10 boys coming on the front of the row and then aiming and whosoever wins gets applaud and all these things. So everyone will say that I target that point and hits it. And then it goes there and if it hits it, they win. If it doesn't, they lose. This guy, he will throw it. When it hits, that's where I was targeting.
Oh, draw the target around it.
So then basically you can be God, like, okay, what everyone is doing is the way I want. Yeah, this is what exactly I wanted them to do. So then you can be God for that purpose. So whatever happens is your target.
Now, I don't
No,
think
but
I fully
that's
answered
not a
your
good
question, but what we're in the process of doing is also, as a Vaigyanik, as a scientist, somebody who studies Jnana and Vijnana, you do understand that the question has to be sensical. It has to make sense, and which means that hidden in the question is an axiom, an assumption that has been made. So what we'll have to do is look at the question itself to understand what exactly is it.
I mean, I know the answer. You will say that the thing who is saying that I want to be God is basically that ego thing.
The Ahankara
And
wants
that-
to have a
yeah.
certain amount of control,
Yeah.
which the Ahankara itself is mithya. And that's the part that we need to understand is just because a cloud of thought appears in my mind and covers up the sun for a moment, does not mean that
that
it
cloud cannot become the sun.
cannot, and neither can cover the sun. The sun is still there. It's absolutely still there.
Yeah,
What
I
I
feel like I really pity them, this ego, of everyone.
Actually, I would say that when you fully get it, you will laugh. You won't pity it. It'll be the world's best joke that Ishvara has played. He will make you laugh, and that's the thing about Ishvara is that he promises you, and I can certainly tell you from my experience as well, that when you do get it, you will not feel sad for it. You will really break out in laughter because it will make you go, "Wow, this was amazing! This was quite a." It's one of those things. There are different times in which you laugh, right? You laugh when you get something that was not quite clear, and then you get it like, "Ah, yeah, I got it." You actually won't be able to stop laughing for a day or two. That's really it won't make you sad.
Have you experienced it?
It won't make you sad. It'll make you happy.
But Professor, this is what I was trying to say, like this desire of being God or very controlling comes in anyone. Is this basically that the person wants everything to be the way they want? That's
Yeah,
what
they
basically
see
you
it.
mean to be
Yeah.
being
They see
God,
it.
right?
It's not gonna go the way you think.
Yeah, exactly. And so just
No, but-
accept whatever it is. Whatever it is, the way it is. So when I was giving that
See,
example of
that's-
friend throwing chalk, it's basically accept whatever is happening. That is what is okay. So
That's
there's.
fine, yeah. I mean, that's the usual
No,
answer.
I'm not answering your question, but in general, discussing that if it comes.
We have to watch Star Wars. I think I have it on DVD.
Well, also that the question which you were answering to me,
Yeah.
that I kind of got lost in the last 2-3 lines. So yeah.
Right. I think what I said was, what did I say? We were talking about yes. So constraint. No, that was.
So you were saying if these two things someone is not able to let them distinguish in you, then you should.
Okay, watch the recording.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Now we have that.
We can watch the recording later.
Sure.
Okay, let's finish up so we can So the other value that is also covered right in the same verse is sahanam sarva dukkhanam apratikar purvakam chinta vilap rahitam sa titiksha nigadyate. So he is talking about titiksha. Titiksha is the ability to chinta vilap rahitam. Chinta is thinking about the past again and again. Vilapa is actually complaining about it. Finding people who will listen to you. We had friends who call you on the phone and tell you how busy their life is and how many difficulties they're having. How now you look at the phone and you're like, I'm not here. Oh, he has 2 phones. That's why you should have 2 phones. You're like, oh, I'm sorry, I was on the. It didn't come on. It didn't ring on that. Apratikar purvakam, without any attempt of responding to it. Sarva dukkhanam sahanam. So titiksha is about the ability to go through the positives and the negatives without having worry, anxiety, pain. Does it make any sense to you? Is it possible for me to pinch you and you'll go, hey, don't pinch me? Right? The first apratikar purvakam. The first reaction will be, stop pinching me. Why are you pinching me? Don't pinch me. I'm not your punching bag, so to speak. But that's not what Ishvara is talking about. What Ishvara is talking about is the ability, especially when you are in the process of vichara. This value really plays an important role when you are doing vichara. When you are doing vichara, there is a tendency that your concentration will be affected by small things that are surrounding you. So for example, my daughter will tell me, oh, my phone dinged, so I had to look at it. I must have gotten an Instagram message that I need to look at. So I will say, you have no titiksha, because if you had titiksha, you would have said, yeah, it's dinging. I have an Instagram message. And I understand that the sky is not falling, right? The house is not on fire. So I can look at it 5 minutes from now. The ability to give yourself the space to say, well, it's okay. I will deal with it in just a few minutes. That ability is titiksha, to be able to suspend your worries, not for real things, okay? Don't do it. If your actual house is actually on fire, please do not have titiksha. At that time, you run out of the house, okay? That's not right. No, I'm practicing titiksha here. I know that part is on fire. I'm quite okay right here. This is no time for vichara. This is the time for running. You run out of the door. That's the way it goes. So when there are real situations, emergencies, you'll know the difference. There's no issue there. Because when a real emergency appears, you'll find it very fascinating. I'm sure it has happened to all of you at some point in time when someone close to you was either hurt or getting hurt right in front of you. I'm sure it has happened to you. Somebody was about to trip and fall, somebody cut themselves with a knife. The person who responds very urgently when that happens is not the ahankara. In fact, the ahankara is not there. The whole jiva responds. It's true, like when you listen to music, I'll say sometimes you get lost in music. But if you really get that sense when somebody very close to you is about to get hurt or is getting hurt, there is a person that shows up. That person has no name. That person has no identity. That person will not tell you, hey, I am from this IIT and that IIT, and I got this. That person will just respond to that situation. That person, the whole person has appeared. That is the jiva, without the bondage of the ahankara, without the bondage of anything else, with all the skills, right? With all the skills, all the knowledge is available to them. They'll know exactly where the medicine is. They'll know exactly where the bandage is, and they'll just respond to that. And when that event is over, somebody else will show up to claim merit for that. I did that, I responded so fast. It's amazing. So now you know the fake and the real, right? The fake will show up afterwards and say, right, I helped you that day. Did you like that? Now it's your turn to make me some dessert. Where did you show up from? If you remember, that person was not there the day of the emergency. There was another person who showed up. An integrated, a well-formed ahankara shows up. An integrated person with whatever skills they have, they are all on the table, available for them to access.
Ahankara was a titiksha at that point of time.
He was
Waiting for the
suspended.
right time.
He was suspended. He was pushed out of the door because your whole antakarna was responding. is the jiva that I've been talking about. That's the jiva that, is part. When we say jiva, that's the jiva that I'm talking about. It's very interesting. When I was a young man, I of course understand this, but then I was reading an article about I think he was from a person from either the Netherlands or Germany, and he would love to climb mountains, the Himalayas, and he would find these very dangerous peaks and climb them. And in his interview, he was saying that when I am climbing that peak and my life is completely at stake, I feel really alive. I feel really integrated. You now know what he was talking about. He was saying that all my worries, all my chinta, everything is suspended. Why? Because I'm hanging on, I'm suspended by my fingers. I have no time or no interest at this point in time to worry about everything else, because it's just me fighting against nature. And so, of course, in the Indian context, we just don't get it, right? We sit there like, really? You're going to do that again? I thought you already did it. No, I like to climb mountains. So Indian people will go, that's amazing. Well, that's all right, I guess. You like that sort of thing. Very few Indians are there are, I'm sure. I'm just overgeneralizing, but most people that I know would go, okay, all right, if that's your... What is he saying? He's saying that that experience makes me so alive that I want to continue to repeat it again and again and again.
It's his form of meditation.
Yeah, got it. That's right. And that's what the whole Vipassana meditation or witness consciousness meditation is about. That is about bringing that integrated individual back. And but the thing is, there is a danger of addiction.
Yeah.
Because you can become addicted to that.
Yeah, people become addicted to meditation as well. Yeah.
And that's when the jiva has appeared, integrated, but Jagat and Ishvara have not. The understanding of Jeev, Jagat and Ishvara and the relationship has not yet become fully clear.
So Osho actually said one thing on this. I was listening to some of his
Familiar
videos.
with.
So he said meditation is addiction, and why people do drugs or alcohol or everything is because they get it to that stage where they can go via meditation. Now he was saying it will be really good if we can make some drug which does not have side effects. So and this was Osho's statement.
So Osho is a very fascinating man.
Yeah.
And if we talk about Osho, we'll talk for a very long time.
Yeah.
But I'll give you a slightly different example, and you will be able to relate to all of this. The idea of addiction, the idea of every night you go to sleep. You have to go to sleep. Your body cannot regenerate unless you go to sleep, right? Eventually everybody goes to sleep, right? And not only ordinary sleep, you're going to deep sleep. He's looking fresh. I'm sure he went to sleep last night. Or either that or he shaved really close. There are two ways in which you can look fresh, right? But you go to sleep in so many ways. When you go to sleep, your ego is suspended, your chintas are suspended, your vilapa is suspended. Nobody complains in their deep sleep. All of them have gone into their unmanifest state. I won't say that it is, I won't even say that they're similar or identical, but when you're talking about a form of meditation where you have absorption to a certain extent, it's somewhat similar to what we're talking about here. But the big difference is, what happens when you wake up? Do you wake up with any self-knowledge? Do you wake up with any knowledge of that Satchidananda Atma into which you had just dissolved? You never do. If that was the case, then everybody would go to sleep and wake up completely knowledgeable. That's not how it works. While meditation is extremely important because it calms the mind and it prepares the mind for you to understand. The understanding of Satchidananda Atma is a shift in cognition. It's something to be understood. The mithyatvam of the ahankara is something to be understood. It is not something to be felt. It is not something to be experienced. So when you'll hear sometimes people will say that you have to experience the self. Well, I'm already here and I'm already ignorant. What more? How more am I going to experience the self? What they're talking about is that you need to understand. There's a shift in cognition, which is what Shankaracharya will talk about, which is what Vivekachudamani will talk about. Within this context of Titiksha, what Shankaracharya is saying is that when you are on your path of Atma Vichara, he says, don't be easily distracted from the pairs of opposites. And we've talked about this before. Our antakarna, the name is instrument. Instruments, they work like sensors. they can measure positive, and this is a differential sensor, it measures both positive and negative, which means that if it is hotter than me, I can experience it. If it is colder than me, I can experience it. And as long as neither of them are going to harm me, Ishwara is saying, it's okay, right? It's 100 degrees outside. Don't be outside for too long. That makes sense. But there's nothing to complain about. There is nothing to discuss about here. It is the temperature that is outside. Just recognize it for what it is. It is raining. It was raining like crazy yesterday. And it was not a good idea for any of us to be out in the rain. We would get drenched. But if we had an umbrella, but there were streams of water. I mean, I drove through pools of water when I got there. If you were on a bike, it is inadvisable to do that because the traction on the wheels is not the same. So for those who didn't come, good choice, because it was not safe to be out there, right? But if it's drizzling a little bit, it's not going to stop you. So understanding the pairs of opposites, their extremes, where you need to act, and which one of them should be able to deviate you from vichara is titiksha. The understanding that says, okay, yeah, it's a little uncomfortable today, but it's not so uncomfortable that I need to stop focusing on my vichara, right? So that's what titiksha is about. Titiksha is giving you the ability to damp out the pairs of opposites to a certain extent. Put a damper on it, and that damper will allow you to not do chinta vilap rahita. You won't worry about it. You will accept the world for what it is. If it was not hot, then it wouldn't be cold. If it wasn't raining, if it wasn't hot, it wouldn't rain. If it doesn't rain, there'll be no greenery. If there's no greenery, what kind of world will we be living in? For it to be that beautiful today, it had to rain yesterday. So there's a whole cycle that we need to recognize. And Ishwara is saying, titiksha is your ability to be able to say, okay, there are pairs of opposites that my body and my experiences are subjected to. And as long as they are within the range of tolerable, and tolerable varies for everyone, right? So I always say to my American friends that the conception of hell, which is hot, does not work for us. Because if we had a conception of hell, it would be very cold. Because Indian people can take the heat. You bring it on. 100 degrees, you complain about 100, we can live to 120, 130, it doesn't bother us. But you drop the temperature to 60 and sweaters will come out. 50, the winter jacket will come out. Especially when the kids come from India, right? They'll be like, in September they'll break out their sweaters and you'll be like, अभी नया है वो अभी अभी आया हो इंडिया से बहुत ही लग रही है wait for next winter and you'll be walking around like a brave man right?
I have an intern at my home living on sublease and exactly the similar thing is like it is summer we were turning on AC and me and my roommate okay now let's turn on the AC it's 7 p.m. or so. He's like, what? It's already cold. You need AC.
It's a matter of perspective, right? Like, thoda sa sehlo beta. It changes.
So we turned up the lid in his room and then he slept and we had the AC on.
It's the way it goes. When you come from there, you're like, oh, botany. So I was telling them that there's a movie called The Day After Tomorrow.
Yeah.
I said, that movie is the scariest movie me and Meghna have seen because we were sitting with we started feeling so cold, we had our blankets out, we were hiding in our blankets and looking at it. It is so cold. So people tell us, have you seen this horror movie or that? I said, no, you should see it. The Day After Tomorrow. That's the scariest movie ever. The whole world becomes cold. It doesn't work for us. For Indian people, that's the definition of so that, by no means am I saying that you should not wear your jacket when it's cold out. Then titiksha is just the ability to understand that there is a damper that you can place within the normal range of circumstances so that it doesn't deviate you from your path of Atma Vichara. That's really, yeah.
So there could be a misinterpretation, and I want to find out where the line is, because when you bring out this dampening of things, so sometimes you become indifferent to things that you should be different. For example, in general, Hindus have this idea that okay, somehow it will get managed and we don't actually stand for something, right? So maybe by putting a dampening on something, we'll be like, okay, it's still raining. I mean,
What's
they're
your
still
initial state?
infringing upon my freedom.
Okay.
They're still doing this, but I can live in this situation. I mean,
That's a
so
very
where
beautiful question.
when do you realize that we are misusing?
Yeah, so think about it. The spread of cholera is intimately connected to the drainage system in the city. And you could say that it rains only 1 month a year. What difference does it make? It's okay. It rains 1 month a year, it floods everywhere. Yeah. Well, it'll just find its way back into the ground. But that 1 month in time, especially if you've lived in Bombay, boy, it rains like crazy and you have to take out your boat. And the problem is not that, the problem is the sewage and the spread of bacteria and the occurrence of diseases like cholera. So first principle always wins, which is ahimsa. First principle, the first value that I need to have is ahimsa. If my ability to damp out things is actually ending up hurting people, then it's not right. First principle will always be ahimsa. Of all the things that Ishvara talks about, the first principle of deciding whether I'm doing the right thing or not is ahimsa. If I am not paying attention to cleanliness because I'm saying, chalta hai, right? The chalta hai, titiksha is like, chalta hai, yaar, it's not so bad. But if your chalta hai is actually ending up causing harm to yourself or to others, then it's not okay. Then it's not chalta hai.
And then exactly, now this might come a little bit of a social discussion. Maybe that this attitude sometimes, like what quote unquote many people mean, not all, by open-mindedness, like accepting everything or it's okay. But then some things which are in short term have no bigger consequences, or you might not realize, but in the long term they might have even much larger consequences. So not understanding that long-term consequences and accepting anything in the name of quote unquote open-minded.
Chalta.
That's basically chalta is the English name and the more fashionable term,
and
open-mindedness.
So remember, and also keep it in perspective. Vivekachudamani is a text, the subject matter of which is Atma Vichara. And when it's talking about Titiksha, it's talking about with the reference to Atma Vichara. It's saying that in your path of Atma Vichara, do not get too distracted by extremes, by variations in weather, by variations in your circumstances, as long as they're tolerable. And this is meant only for Atma Vichara. Now, if we take it out of context and pull it out and make it into a thing that is being used in society in general, then the first principle of dharma will always reign supreme. The first principle of dharma is ahimsa. Ahimsa paramo dharma. If your actions are causing hinsa, which means they are hurting others, hurting yourself, it's no longer in accordance with dharma. It may be titiksha, but it's not in accordance with dharma, not in this instant. In which
So
case,
even
dharma will
accepting that is adharma.
Yes, then you would have to fix it. Because dharma will say ahimsa paramo dharma.
So you're responsible if ahimsa is happening,
If hinsa is happening in front of you,
if hinsa is happening and you are not the source, it's your responsibility.
absolutely.
Even if you are the source, it is your responsibility.
Yes,
If you are source, then it is.
you can
different.
stop it, but
you
if
are not-
someone else is the source, it's harder to control.
Yeah.
But that's a situation where you need to find the path to say, okay, I don't accept this. This is not okay.
So for instance, I'll just take a classic example. In India, when the Aadhaar cards were being distributed, so the postmen who were delivering that, they were asking 10 rupees to give it, which was not at all their $10, 10 rupees. It was not meant to be. So when a postman came to give at my place, I said, I won't give 10 rupees. So he said, why? I said, because you're asking it in exchange of Aadhaar card, which you should not ask, and all these things. And sometimes I'm also in mood of taking on people. So then there's another guy, a vegetable seller. He said, "अरे प्यार से मांग रहा है दे दो." तो हम कहें दोगे 10 रुपया में प्यार से मांग रहे हैं तो हम क्यों दें? So basically then, sure, 10 rupees is a small amount. It really chalta hai. But then when I see these things or any social issue we can pick up, I'm just taking up this example.
Yeah.
So this postman, now slowly and gradually he might grow up. He might start taking contracts of postal department now by making contacts, and then he might do bigger corruptions, and then one day he might end up not delivering my visa on time. So same thing happens in railways if they are selling tea for 2 rupees extra. Slowly and gradually they'll become contractor who fixes the train lines, and he will never fix them properly, and then one day it might end up that I might lose my life by train accident. So then crushing these things at small step, and or small freedom when people take in life, okay, it's fine to smoke one day. So isn't it like breaking up the things? You're breaking the shackles and then you're making it easier to smoke second time, because
Certainly, all of those things are valid. And you should fight the fights that you can fight. And you should fight the fights that make sense that day. And you may have bigger fish to fry, so to speak, or maybe bigger pakoras to fry, in our case. Because, imagine the situation was a little bit different and you had a parent who was sick at home. You really didn't have time to mess around with this. It would be a different situation. So life is a little more complex. Some days you fight the fights that you can, and some days you can't. I'm not going to fix society overnight. That's not going to happen. Having your values and sticking by them are the biggest contribution that you can make to society. And where should I go looking for values? And you have to look no further, because Shiraz himself told what the values are. And there is a book that Swamiji has that's called The Value of Values. It's an excellent book, and I was debating on whether I want to cover that book or Vivekachudamani first. Someday we'll cover The Value of Values. They're excellent values. If there's any one of them that seems like it doesn't work for you, you can always rethink what is the appropriate value for the situation that you're in. Granths like Ramcharitmanas, granths like Gita, Bhagavatam, they all provide excellent values. And when some people will say that all religions are the same, what they're trying to say in so many words is that the values are uniform across. In most cases, the values are uniform. All religions will teach you the values to be kind, to be compassionate, and so on and so forth. And as long as those values are in synergy with the values that you are working with, that's great. You can say yes. But when it comes to the topic of knowledge of the self, I wouldn't say that they are all going to be giving you the same knowledge. Okay, so what has happened here is that we've taken a 1.5 hour class instead of, which is normally what we seem to do. We end up going for an hour and a half.
Summer bias.
Summer bias, yeah. What we can do is we can do our Shanti Path, and then we can finish with our Prasada for the day. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Very good. This was a little more comfortable, so if you guys want to do this